Well, hello once again, and welcome to another episode of Inside IUE Sports. I'm your host, Kaleb Gillock, and as always, we've got another great show on the way for you here today. It's hard to believe, but 10 years ago, the Red Wolves were actually the pioneers, and this year we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Red Wolves nickname. And joining me to talk about that, Rebecca Hester and Neil Sabine. Thank you for joining me today, guys.
Thank you.
Well, let's just start off by talking a little bit about it. Let's think back to that 2007-2008 year. What was kind of the atmosphere around campus that kind of led to that switch from the Pioneers to the Red Wolves? Rebecca?
Sure. On campus, the atmosphere is very different than what we have now. Campus was a lot more calm, less students on campus. We had a good student population, of course, but they weren't on campus. They weren't engaged in student activities and things like that. So moving to change things up and create a new culture was really a good drive and a good mission for that change.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Neil?
Well, back then, we had club sports.
Right.
So we had volleyball for women, basketball for men, and then men and women's golf. But they're all club.
Right.
So they weren't affiliated with anything. So it was pretty much a wash between the people that participated and the expenses with those club sports.
Right.
And at the time, we had some fiscal problems, and it didn't seem likely that club sports was something we could sustain over time.
Okay.
So that's when we started thinking about moving to the NAIA and becoming more focused on student athletes versus just club sports were basically just students that kind of like intramurals.
Sure.
Is basically what it was back then. And there was no financial support, no scholarships for athletes at that time.
Right.
And so that's when the thought was to move to a little bit more structured program and also expand the number of sports we had on campus.
Right. You were also talking before we went on the air that at one point in time it looked like athletics may not have ever been a thing at IU East because of some of those issues, right?
Exactly. We back then is when they built the new Ivy Tech across the way, and at that time we used to have remedial courses like in mathematics. It was about half of our credit hours, and when Ivy Tech built the new building and there were some changes at the state, all remedial classes went to Ivy Tech. So we took a huge hit on our campus financially. And there was concern about the future of the campus. And one of the things that we had outside people look at us, and we tended to have a lack of direction of what we wanted to do. And we thought athletics might be a way to do two things. Number one, help identify the campus. And at that time, it was believed for every student athlete we had, we brought two more students along with them. Like, so, say for example, you're a basketball player, and you're from Milan. Well, then there's two other kids that you knew that didn't play basketball but knew you. And when you came here, they came along with you. So that was really the kind of the beginning of athletics. Back then, for club sports, it was about 34,000, maybe 35,000. And we looked at joining the NAIA. There was money up front to get into the NAIA and to our conference. So there was upfront money. And then we went from about 34 to about 140 in the budget. So it was a big change. And so the concern was about the student athlete. Were they going to help bring the academics up or bring the academics down? Because when you look at IU, you know, a lot of those student athletes down there leave early, never graduate. And so the many of the faculty and even administration at the time looked at Big Ten athletics versus what usually happens on smaller campuses. And on smaller campuses, almost all the students graduate and they take a full academic load and they have to have a certain GPA, which the general student body doesn't have. They're actually higher than keep your eligibility than the student population at large. And over time, the student athletes have outperformed, as a rule, the general population of students.
Oh, nice. Well, Rebecca, let's think back again to that starting process. There's obviously a committee formed, from my understanding. That was before I got to IU East, so I'm kind of learning about it as we go here. But there's some type of committee formed, and that kind of was a narrowing down process of what names there was going to be, and obviously to the finalists. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yes, it was a process. It took quite a few months. It's been a couple years, of course, so trying to remember that whole process. But we look toward the campus community as well as the Richmond community and the community that we serve within our student population. And we look toward others to give us suggestions and ideas and thoughts. And we took that into consideration, narrowed down the list. Then we opened a huge vote. And we wanted to get as many people to vote as possible. Right. We wanted everybody to feel a part of the process and have buy-in, of course. And through that month-long process, we were able to clarify kind of what we wanted to be seen as and what we wanted to embody as a mascot in a campus.
And Neil, why do you think Red Wolves was the popular choice there?
I voted for Centaurs.
Centaurs, all right.
I like that. I like that. The reason Red Wolves got picked, because wolves were originally here before we were here, and Red Wolves may have been the type of wolf native to Indiana.
Okay.
So Peggy Brandstrader put that name forward, and it was one of the finalists. And like Rebecca said, the vote was tallied, and Red Wolves was the winner. Much to my chagrin, because it would have been cool to be Centaurs.
Yeah, it would be. So we had Centaurs. Rebecca, what were some of the other unique names that were thrown out?